Hey, it's Matt with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Wednesday. It's October 14th. This will be our chart lesson for today. And really, we spent most of the morning from just prior to 9, really up until lunchtime, we were trading down. It didn't feel that way because we started out with this range up here, and then once we broke lower, my first thought would be to look for a measured move down. And you can see we went a little further than that before we bounced. And we kind of stayed in that level there for a little bit. We tried to go lower a couple more times and then bounced back out of there. Uh, I do believe this kind of yellowish gold channel is valid. It doesn't really help you. You couldn't find it until you got this swing here, and then it didn't come back in play till after lunch or during lunch. And then we also got this big overshoot, so that may mean it's over anyway. So I don't think that this channel helps you. You can see prices working off the midline down through here. So I believe it to be correct. It was kind of hard to find because you get this overshoot, and generally when you get an overshoot, you will correct pretty quickly. So when it continued lower again, then you got to say, hey, maybe you don't have it right here. Maybe it's a little bigger. But if you drag it on out, it fits there as well. Um, but there's still some questions about that because you wouldn't have you wouldn't have drug it out until almost 11:30. And then you can see it is still fitting pretty nicely up through there off the midline and everything. But you probably would have had it right here at first, and it fits there some, but it not really as well as it does once you get the full look at it. But by this time, it's lunchtime, and then from there on, we were just working sideways really. So it would have helped you to have it on here maybe when we came back here, but I still don't think you want to enter in there, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. Um, it might have helped strengthen these trades a little bit if you looked at it like this. So it just was a little hard to find this one. And prices just didn't really come back to the trend line enough to really give you a good look at things. So you had to use this short-term stuff. But there's two ways I would have looked. Once we went lower here, you had to assume it might be a trading range early with the highs and lows here, and you can kind of see where we were getting most of the support, and most of the resistance was right across here. But you'd want to measure that leg, of course, and then look for a possible measured leg down. You can see we bounced right in there before we went lower. And then, of course, measure the range, as I already showed you, and look for a possible measured move, which, again, we kind of found some support across there, and we dropped a little lower, but we got back inside that pretty quickly. So I think a lot of people looked at it that way. Um, so it was really an interesting day. For the most part, you had to trade this short-term stuff, and this is a pretty strong trend in here. So I wouldn't be looking to buy once you know we're trending down like this. I'd be very leery about buying until I have one buy here late in the afternoon, but that's when it was pretty obvious we were going sideways again. So till then, you don't see any buys down through there really. And that's why, because by that point, it's obvious. Look at that EMA pointing straight down there. And most all your prices are below it. And then suddenly you start swinging above and below it again, which tells you range. Just like up here, it looks like a roller coaster. Look at the EMA, how it looks like a roller coaster. And prices are swinging above and below until finally they get consistently below. And that's when you know we're trending lower again. You had to be real careful getting short in here, and by the time you get down here, it's too late. And this was the first opportunity you had to go short again right in here. So anyway, I hope that gives you the big picture. One other thing I wanted to talk about real quick before I get into the trades. Seems to be coming up a lot again lately. I got a couple of emails, a few posts on the in the forum and so forth. But people will try to tell you that these trend lines are subjective. They're not. Some days they're easier to draw than others, and some days they're really simple to draw. Lately, with all the volatility and the market kind of being up and down and flat a lot, it's a little harder to draw these. It is. It's not as straightforward. Generally, you want to start at the high and you go through your first swing. And this was, and that's, and you use the closes. You start at the high and generally you'll use the closes. And that's exactly how I drew that. And you can see you could have had that trend line at 10 o'clock and it comes back into play again at 12:30. So that's 2.5 hours prior that you could have drawn that trend line. Now it's pretty clear where the lows are. That wasn't clear today. So this was still a little harder channel, but it's there. And you wouldn't have been able to really get the full gist of where the midline and the trend channel were until 11:30. By that time, it's really almost played out. So, but you could have had the trend line, which is the key piece of it, by this second swing at a little after 10 o'clock this morning. And you can see it clearly came back into play at 12:30. So it's there. And you get instant feedback. This is what a good channel looks like. Notice that prices, every time they come to the trend line, they bounce. Every time they get to the upper side, they turn down. Now they overshot here. Generally that leads to a break. And notice what happens. You get a break of that trend line, move to a new high, and then it turns down. And look how prices are reacting off that trend channel right there. They're bouncing off the lows, turning down off the highs, bouncing off the lows, turning down off the highs, bouncing off the low, turning down off the highs, bouncing off the low, and then you get a break and we move to a new low and it reverses. Same thing here. So you get instant feedback. Now this channel right here, I drew a little different. I didn't start at the very low because it's way down here. And somebody will say, well, why didn't you draw that one off the low? Well, prices didn't fit properly. Look how they're fitting here. You're turning up off the lows, down off the highs, up off the lows, then you get to overshoot, then you get to break, and look where it turns down again. And so you draw it where prices fit the best. Generally, it's going to be off the high like here and then off the closes of the first swing. 99% of the time, that's probably how you're going to draw it. And if it's a good long-term trend, it's going to play out the rest of the day. Now, we got these shorter-term ones in here you had to play in between, but you pretty much could get this trend line off those first two swings in the morning. And just so happens the second one was at 10 o'clock. Now, this one, you would have had this channel in place really before 7 o'clock, just before 7 o'clock. And then it played out all the way until almost 9 o'clock. So 2 hours. So, somebody sent me an email and says, yeah, you're drawing those all after the fact. No. There's plenty of evidence that I draw most of these trend lines first thing in the morning. Do I always get it 100% right? No. Sometimes I'm a little off. Sometimes it changes a little bit, just like today. You really couldn't find this one until after 10 o'clock. So, no, it wasn't on my mid-morning chart. I really didn't use it. It really didn't. I really wasn't sure it was even valid until down here. So, yeah, this one, you couldn't really prove it out till late in the day. Really, when it bounced down here and you drew it, it was pretty obvious it's fitting along those midlines. Actually, it was pretty obvious right in here because right here we shot right through the midline. It did come back and test it here, and it tested it here, and it tested it here. And you can see it testing it there. You can see it tested a few times here. So sometimes you can find it just off the mid, if you get the trend line right and the midline's right, then this would have just been sitting down here by itself, and we would kept turning up early, and you would have thought, hey, that's not right. So sometimes it's easier than other days. But if anybody tells you that trend lines are subjective, don't believe them because they're not. Sure, you can get subjective to exactly maybe having it off just a little, but usually what people will do is just like right here, they'll send me their thing, and it'll look something like that right there. Now that's close, but that's probably not going to help you because look how it's turning before it gets to the lines. It's not fitting right. You get instant feedback on these things. But if you draw it back here off those first couple of swings, like I teach you to do it, and put it in there, and then suddenly it all fits and looks a little better. Prices are bouncing off the lines. You get your overshoot, leads to a break, which that's generally what happens. The overshoot tells you a break's probably coming soon, and sometimes you don't even get a retest. You get a reversal after an overshoot like that. But we run up, make a new high, and we test the overnight highs, and off we're going to the downside. So I hope that's helpful. I've used half my 20 minutes here talking about trend lines, which I didn't mean to do, but I think it was time to talk about them again. So anyway, get this line back like I originally had it. And it looked like that. But anyway, 7 o'clock came right in this little move up here. And notice you got a new low and you get a first entry and then you got a second entry short that fails and there's a engulfing bar. It breaks lower and turns and goes out. When it goes out that high side, I like going long there. I made it green just because it wasn't clear that this was a range day, even though it was really looking like it. And at that point, I really had the support up here. And that's another reason I like this one, because it shoots through the support, pulls back and tests it, and then works higher. At this point, I'm looking at this as a range, and I'm expecting prices. Plus, notice when we came through that support right there, that we never pulled back and tested. Well, prices are almost always going to pull back relatively soon and test that. And that's what was going on. It looked like we may go lower here, but it didn't. We continued on. But that's what prices are trying to do, come back and test that breakout area. So just keep that in mind. So I like that one. It's real close to being, if you look at it like this and you were looking at that support, which you should have been early on, it looks like a pretty good trade. So you could actually argue for that one to be, blue almost. But later on I moved it down here because this is where we bounced that last time. So anyway, I like that for a long. It didn't really take off really quickly. Still works. Once you went into that congestion, I just stay clear. And then we turn up here. We get the overshoot. We come down. You expect a possible break. It's really tempting to go long right there, but I'd wait on a higher low. And then by the time you get the higher low, you're just going sideways. And then finally, I marked this one. It's like a we really pulled back again. Notice the low and you turn down once and you try to go lower again and it really can't even get lower. You just make a little 2-bar matching low there. Relatively bullish bar. We're probably going to run up. We're probably going up to here, but we're probably at least going to test this high. So I like that one. It's a little aggressive, so I marked it green. You had to be real patient today. There's a true failed second entry short here. But prices didn't break above, and then you just get a couple of inside bars, and it looks like congestion again, and you're a little ways from the EMA. It's just not a very good setup. And you're going to get a lot of that today. And then we run up here. We finally make a new high, and we go into this little congestion. We have a failed breakout. You just really don't want to go. Even though you're a little ways from the EMA, you're still right into that support. And see how it bounces. Sometimes it'll bounce and run up there and stop you out and then go lower. So just wait till you get something that looks a little more like a reversal, which finally you get something here. It's not a true reversal because we didn't break higher here, but you can see we try to go higher once, and we push through. We try to go higher twice. Fairly bearish bar. It does confirm that trend line. I like that one. That's the first decent trade of the morning, really, other than this one. And this one's, again, like I said, this very first trade, you could almost argue for that to be blue. It's real close. But yeah, this was the first really decent trade of the day because it does confirm that trend line. And it does pull back and test the EMA. And off it goes. And then you get your failed second entry long here. You're a little away from the EMA. Again, it's right off that key entry point, though. It breaks higher, turns and goes down. We're probably headed back to the low. This is really looking like a range day. So that's another one you may risk it. It's a little aggressive though. And then again, it's just too congestive. It's a shame because that's a nice move down. And this is kind of getting into the middle of the range too. So you got to be real careful there as well. But this is a relatively large range. And you got a clear trend line working there. If you get a good trend line within a range, by all means trade it. Just be careful and make sure it's confirmed, and you know it's very consistent. You can see that right there until you get the break. But then we bounce down here at the lows, and there's no rejection there. Notice how prices are just hanging around. They're not going lower, but they're not going higher either. It takes it a few minutes, and then finally you push through the EMA, you pull back, it fails in, it turns down, fails instantly and turns back up and goes out the other side. Go long right there. And you're expecting prices to come back up here. But they only make it to the midline, and then we're just chopping sideways again. There is a failed second entry long there, but that's just too congestive. There's a little failed break lower here, and we would expect prices to try to go higher again here. But so that's a possibility. Again, you're probably better off to wait on the higher low and you don't get one. But if you want to be a little aggressive, maybe you go long there. You're almost always better to wait on the higher low. And it does turn back up. Then you're working down. You get a first entry short, and then you get a second entry short that fails. I like going short right there. Notice how it also comes back and tests the breakout. That's a failed second entry long. And it's clearly working off that trend line. And you might have drawn this trend line too, and it does come back there and make a little lower high off of it, but you can't be sure about that because you got the resistance across there anyway. So, but when it comes back from underneath the little support resistance line, and we'd already broke out once before, so we've probably cleaned this out. And notice it works on down, and that's where you would expect maybe prices to bounce. Somebody sent me their chart this morning and went long right there. Really, you can see there's, by the time that happens, there's 3 or 4 bars, and with that little bar, it almost makes it congestion. And notice how we made a new low there again too. I'd skip that one. The fact that we've already pushed down once, and that trend line is what really changes it, but it's a little bit congestive too. And really, if you're looking for it to bounce down here now, this is the true support. This is just, we bounced here, and it looks like there's a little hiccup right there, but I think that's just turning down off the EMA before it goes higher. So I think they called that a triple test, but and again, there's a little higher low bar there, but that's not really I think you're just turning down off the EMA and then turning back up there. You got a little resistance into the EMA. So that's how I see that one anyway. And we come on down, and we do find some support here, but that certainly doesn't look like congestion. Or rejection, I mean. Rejection, this is what rejection looks like. It takes off real fast. And notice right across here, you're not getting rejection. You do with that one bar, but just assume that this isn't here. That's what it would look like. Let me see if I can find. This looks like rejection. Notice how it pulls back, it tests it, and then it just takes off. Prices don't hang around there. They take off. Look at them hanging around here. And here they're just kind of hanging around. It's not a real bullish. I mean, that's a bullish bar, but it's not a perfect bullish bar. I mean, it could have closed a tick lower, and it almost looks like a doji. That bar is basically the same thing, except it closed down it opened one tick higher and closed one. So there's not much difference between those two bars. And of course, we head lower, and you just don't really get a chance to enter here. You're getting so far away from the EMA, I don't think it's worth entering down here. You're really bouncing off the lows until you finally get an overshoot. And this is too strong a trend now, so you're not going to be looking for longs here unless you get a reversal. And you need a break outside. You need this to know that this whole move down is over. And instead, we just kind of go sideways here. Notice that new low, and you get a first entry, second entry. That's a second entry short. We're a little bit away from the EMA. There is a little trend line working up there, a break. There's actually 2 legs back, so that's tempting right there. Because that's the first time back to the EMA. But with that overshoot, you almost know you're going to get a break. It's coming soon. So even if it doesn't come here, it may not go very far before it turns up, and that's exactly what happens. And normally I'd tell you to probably wait on this one too. But the fact that it's a failed breakout that far away and hasn't come back to test it yet, there's enough room back to the EMA. You got a break and a new high. Generally, you want to wait on a lower high. You get one here, but now you got to go short right back into those lows. Not a good place. And then you don't want to be entering way down here until we finally bounce. And there's a second entry short right here, but that bar's too bullish. That bar's an inside bar. But then you do make the higher low that breaks higher and then turns back down. So I like going short there. Running up, you get a break, you attempt to go higher, it traps people and turns down all in one bar. We're probably going to test that low, or try to. Then we just, from here on, it just really gets a lot of sideways. You don't want to trade that. You might look at a failed breakout here. Look at all that resistance across there. You can see that resistance. Failed breakout. So that's one you might attempt to trade. But with this this channel working down, with this channel working down here, and the fact that we tried to go lower several times and haven't been able to get there, we're probably going to work back to something that probably to this support here, or this resistance here, or some trend line that's probably up here, which you probably should have had that drawn just in case. You don't really end up getting a setup off of it, but so that leads you to think, hey, I might not want to go short there because we may be heading back to here, or even either back to here. So I'm a little leery of that one as well. I think you're better off to wait on a lower high, and you just don't get one. And that's why you wait on a lower high, because it just keeps climbing higher. And it ends up going sideways here, but again, you don't get a setup. There's a lower high here, but then you're right back into that support. You don't have any room there. It would have worked, but you don't know that. So again, you just had to be, it's one of those days. There's just not a lot of setups here. We're working up. There's a reversal here. It is off of this trend line. Now you're right back into the middle and you're getting close to the highs. This is one that you might could argue for because we are on the other side of the midline of the middle of this range. But there's still kind of a downward bias here too. And you got to consider this possible trend line. So I don't think you want to go long right there either. You run up here, and now you got a break and 2 legs up, and you've also got a failed break out of all that support or resistance across there. And you're a long way away from the EMA. So that's one you might risk. Again, it's aggressive. You get the lower high here, but once again, you're right back in the middle. It is off that trend line though. And that's a fairly obvious trend channel working lower. It's a very bearish bar, so you may risk that one. That's just one leg down. You're probably going to get the next leg down. We're probably headed to here. We may be going to make a new low. I don't think we quite make a new low. No, we don't. I think we maybe do make a lower low than that one, but it doesn't make a new low for the trend down. We never get that today. So then it bounces, and it's pretty obvious we're going sideways here. This is a higher low. It is pretty close to the EMA, but this is what I'd be more worried about, the middle of the road here. And you can see how it kind of hesitates when it gets there. But you still got room there. It's a nice bullish bar. This does look like rejection, and we don't go much lower before you get another real strong bar. The EMA is a little concerned. You always want to be concerned about the EMA, but when you're going sideways like this, your best trades are generally going to be right into that EMA, so you're going to have to trade into that. And you hadn't had a whole lot of options today, so the odds are on your side that we're probably going higher, and that may be the best you get, because by the time you get a reversal, which is here, which does work, by the way, but if this bar would have broke higher, you might trade that right there. But the fact that this one becomes an inside bar, now you know you got congestion. It really is congestion prior to that as well. Prices are working down there, back to this trend line and back to test the EMA. So I just don't think you can enter there. And that takes you into 2 o'clock. So we're 25 minutes into this, and there weren't a lot of trades today. So, but I won't say I wasted 10 minutes, but I spent 10 minutes talking about trend lines and trend channels, and I think that's important. So, but not a lot of trades today. There's quite a few green ones in here. The market's just really odd lately. Hopefully we'll get a little better. Yesterday was a really good day. Monday, not so good. Today, better than Monday maybe, but still not a great trading day. So maybe we'll get a little better, something a little easier tomorrow. And tomorrow we'll wrap up another week, believe it or not. So I'm not going to beat around the bush. We're 26 minutes into this thing, so this video is a little long. I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow and wrap up our week. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.